Today's workflow topic for what I call periodic review. And the periodic review can cover many different things. It is not a standard process out of the box with DDM, but I think it's a good example of how you can build and manage your own processes that we don't include out of the box. There's been an enhancement lately with the workflow advanced capabilities that allowed me to make this periodic review workflow just that little bit sweeter. So I'm going to put my preview pane just on the right hand side for a moment, and as we can see here in my search folders I have a periodic review folder type. So I've just prefixed them with an X to identify that these are not ones that are available out of the box with DDM. So I've called this one periodic review. If I just run an open search, we can see here that I've got several examples. I'm just going to close my navigation window to make it a little bit easier to visualize what we're talking about. Now, if I select this particular folder, what we have here is we have a periodic review number. I've given this a title or a description. It's for a micrometer, a 0 to 50 more and right micrometer. And as we can see here in the third attribute, this is instrument calibration. Now I'm going to open this into its own window. So these attributes, I built them inside DDM in the administration tool against the folder type. And for anybody who doesn't know how to do that, there are online training courses that you can attend free of charge for that. But what I'd like to do here is I'm going to look at my workflow. It's currently under review, but it's owned by a different user. Okay, if I refresh the screen, I really need to take control of this, but I can't because I'm not in this role. So I'm going to build a new example. Let me clear my screen and I will say I'm creating a new periodic review folder. So let's say this one is for a vernier. I'm hoping I've spelt that right. A measuring instrument, a vernier, and let's say this is a more and right, and I think they're 12-inch verniers, 10 or 12 inch. Let's just say it's a 12-inch vernier. Okay, now what is the review type here? Well, as you can see here, I've got lots of options in here because a periodic review can be anything within your business that needs to be reviewed periodically. So account management, certificate compliance, controlled documents, instrument calibration, machine servicing, a quality procedure, training, travel documents. Now this example is for an instrument calibration. I've set up another field here to say who is the person in the business who is responsible for doing the review. Now, rather than creating a standard lookup list, what I've actually done here, if I go to the DDM administration tool, okay, just log into DDM administration. I've created some new groups in here, and as you can see, I've prefixed the group with the word role. So this is not a department, a list of departments. These are specific roles within those departments. Okay, so typically individuals. If I go back to here, this is a lookup field, this is a lookup field that does a query on the current database. So let's take a look at that. If I go to my folder types, and I say for periodic review folder type, attributes, review owner. So this is an SQL query, so it's a lookup field that says select the group name description from this group where the group name begins with role. Where's the word role? like this. Okay, so it's just a query on the local database, and the reason I've done it this way is if we create new roles, it will automatically add it to those lists. Okay, so to try and make it self-maintaining. So let me just confirm that and go back to the client. Okay, so let's say the role is for instrument calibration, let's say production manager. Now the next three fields are all related. I've got here the expiry date, how long we allow the review to happen, and therefore what is the review date. So for example, if this was an annual review, then I would set the expiry to 1 year's time, and if I allow 1 month for the review to happen, we would set the review date to 1 month before the expiry. Okay, so if I say the expiry date, well, I'll come to that next. The review period might be a minute, a year, so you can put values in here. Could be monthly, quarterly, weekly, yearly, etc. So you build the values into this field as straight lookup options. Now I've created one here called 1 minute, so that for doing this demonstration, we don't have to wait for 11 months for the timeout to happen. So I've created a situation that is not normal, but it's purely for demonstration purposes. And therefore, if I set my expiry date to today at local time of 14:15, okay, and I'm allowing 1 minute for the review to happen, okay, when I select the role, hold on, I'm tripping myself up here because I'm not allowed to, because I'm not in the role. So if I just send this into the workflow and say periodic review, I've hard coded it to go to this group, so already I've tripped myself up. Apologies. Let me just put myself in that role so I can demonstrate properly. So role, production manager. For this business unit, I want to add myself into that role. Confirm. Okay, and therefore, if I send it into this workflow, we've now added this folder to the workflow. Now, I want to edit the folder, and I'm going to set my expiry date to today at 14:17. Okay, I'm allowing 1 minute for the review to happen, and therefore if I say send this because the review has already happened, so this is now waiting for the timeout on the current review. If I reopen this folder, we are waiting at this step for the next review to happen. Okay, we can see here that the review date in green has been set to 1 minute before the expiry. So I'm going to repeat myself. If this was an annual review, you might set the expiry date for 1 year's time. If you allow 1 month for the review to take place before the expiry, then we would set the review date to 1 month before the expiry. So this is how these three fields are related to each other. Now, I've only set it for 1 minute, but let's have a look at what's happening in order to make this field automatically set itself to 1 minute before the expiry. Okay. If I go to the admin tool and I go into the workflow engine, this is my workflow. Let me just bring this up. Okay, so on arriving at this step in the workflow, active waiting for next review, let's just quickly look back there. Active waiting for next review. So, on arriving at this step, I've now got the capability of setting an advanced action. This advanced action is now the ability to run an SQL function. Now, most of you will be aware that we could already create a folder action automatically within the workflow. It's one of our advanced workflow capabilities. Now we've got the additional capability of running an SQL script. If I look at the one that I've created here, this SQL script, and I won't take the credit for it because I don't do SQL, so you'd have to get somebody who understands SQL to do this. But essentially what we're saying here is we want to update the periodic review folder type, and we want to set the folder review date. When the review period is 1 minute, we want to set the expiry to -1 minute of the review date. So this is the SQL script that does the magic for us to set the review date to 1 minute before the expiry. Okay, now this capability means that you can do all kinds of clever things with workflow now. Okay, we've got some notes and comments that we've added in here. The most important thing is when you accept your SQL function, you have to accept the liability, because this could be very dangerous. You could quite easily put in an SQL command that wipes out the database. So we're happy to give this extended capability, but we can't be held responsible for what happens. So the administrator is in control of what's happening here. I'm going to accept mine. Okay, and let me just close the workflow off. So if we go back to our workflow, if I do a refresh on the screen, if I just reopen this, we'll see in the workflow that it's now gone back to the review step in the workflow. Okay, so this timeout, we're going to have a look at the timeout. So if we go back to the workflow and we go into the timeout on this field, rather than it being a specific amount of time, we're asking it to time out based on a specific date, which in our case is the folder review date. So when it gets to this date and time, it's going to go to this step in the workflow, to under review here. Okay, let's just accept that. So it's bounced back. What's also happened when we send it back is that we've also set a function to clear the expiry date. And the reason for this is I've now got 1 minute to do the review. If I try and send it forward in the workflow to say that I finished the review, it's telling me I need to set the expiry time for the next review. Okay, so we're trying to make it fail safe here by saying, well, you can't send it to be waiting if you haven't actually specified what that date is. So if I edit the form again, and this time, maybe I will say, well, the expiry is at the end of the month. Okay, and we might allow a different amount of time. We'll leave it as 1 minute. In fact, I'll keep it as today. And we say it's going to expire in 14/22. Okay, and because I have now set that field, it does allow me to send forward in the workflow. So although I'm showing a specific use model here or case, these functions within the workflow can be used for different things. Now, I mentioned that we clear the active expiry date. How do we do that? If I go back into the workflow and we go to the under review step, when we arrive at this step, we run another SQL function that says set this attribute periodic review, active expiry date, set it to null. So that is clearing the old expiry date, and therefore the user will be forced to enter a new one when pushing the workflow forward again. So, just to recap, it's now sitting waiting. We've automatically said set the review date to 1 minute before the expiry date. As a mechanism, you could use this for many things. My example is a periodic review, and a periodic review can be used for many things like servicing, instrument calibration, training records, etc. So I think it's a really useful capability within DDM, and just an example of how you can extend the system yourself.